This is Stacey Eldridge. Welcome to Captivated. This world vies for our attention in 1,000 different ways. But the most important thing, the preeminent thing, the essential thing, is to give our attention to Jesus. Welcome, friends. So glad that you are joining me today. Bless you. I am going to join with Paul in Ephesians 3, and this is what I pray. I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long, how high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Yes and amen. And this is a personal prayer. This is for you personally, that even today you may come to know more deeply how vast, how immeasurable, how all-encompassing is the love of God for you. So today, we're continuing what is going to be a 3-part series of hearing women's testimonies. My prayer is that you be encouraged, you be blessed, you remember your own with thanksgiving, and maybe even be provoked for more with Jesus. Today, my guest is my dear friend, Elaine Supple, who lives in Ireland, a little south of Dublin. I had the joy of meeting Elaine about 7 years ago. And Elaine, you may or may not know this, but I was immediately drawn to her life, her passion, the quality of her character, and her walk with God, as well as her sense of humor. She's funny. Okay, you are funny. I love her, and I could go on, but she's Irish, and this kind of thing mortifies her. So there you go. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you, Stacey. Yes, it does mortify us as Irish.
Are you
Too many compliments.
too many in a row? I think you've turned a little red, as a little bit of blushing, but I could go on. And I am so glad, so honored, and so looking forward to you sharing your story with us, your story with God. So let's just dive right in. And how about if you begin by just telling us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, sure. My childhood was a little bit different than a lot of people. My dad was in the RAF, and so I grew up moving around a lot. I have two brothers, a twin brother and an older brother about 18 months older, and we grew up moving a lot over, a certain period of time. So between 1 and 15, I had 22 different homes and 16
Oh my
schools.
goodness. Can we just pause there? 22 different.
Yes, yes,
Wow.
a
That has
lot,
an
a
effect.
lot, a lot. It does, it does. I was very fortunate that my mother, she was a very, very kind, nurturing mom. And so that really was our lifeline
Mm,
through those years. And so she always, home was always felt safe. It always felt a place that, that we could come close. And actually, because of the lifestyle that I had, we ended up being quite close. My relationship with my brothers and my mom, we were particularly close because we had to, I suppose, in some ways, hold on to each other because there's so much transition all the time that we couldn't really afford to connect or really grow our roots deep with people or in the places that we
right,
lived.
right. I was thinking about that just as you were speaking, that that doesn't afford the developing of deep friendships with schoolmates.
Yeah, it was hard. So my friendships were really with my brothers.
Ah, there you go.
I had a lot so there, and that was the consistent part. So for me was that, my twin brother, we were always up to monkey business, the two of us, my older brother, 18 months old. We were our own little crew. We operated that way. And so God really, that was his provision for sure for me. I did have friends along the way, but it was always hard to let them go. So yes, it was tricky. It was tricky to develop those relationships.
And was there any time in those years that you felt God's presence or his pursuit of you?
I have a funny story. The first time I ever felt God's presence, I'm not too sure if it was God's presence, but at the time I felt as a child it was. I was about 7 years old. And one morning my mum woke up and she goes, "Right, we're all going to church." I remember thinking, oh no, I'd had a couple of experiences of church up to that point, and I just thought they were so boring. And I had to get dressed up as well, I had to get out of my shorts and, make myself look good. And I was standing at the front door of our house, and I looked up, was looking up at the sky, and I said, God, if you're really there, will you make it rain so we don't have to go?
And
So, and can you guess what
I guess it
happened?
started to rain.
Started to rain, which in the time we were living in Cyprus, which was unusual. And I just remember my mum coming out and going, "Oh no, no, let's just leave it then." And a sense of relief, but also a little glimmer of, is there a God?
That is a hilarious story. So
Um, so yeah,
so going to church was not a normal part of your growing up?
no, it wasn't a normal part. Both my parents were Irish Catholics. They'd grown up very much in the tradition and, going to church, saying the rosary for them in their own personal families, but certainly they weren't passing that on to us. And so, no, I didn't grow up really being taught really in any tradition. Um, but the next time that I felt, God's presence going from that very young, immature one was when I was about, what age was I? 11. And at that point, my parents, who were not, they were real more so nominal Catholics, and we were living in Yorkshire at the time. And so charismatic renewal was really kind of in the 70s was
Right.
coming right through, really
Yes.
all over. I'm sure it was happening
Oh,
in
yeah, it
America
was
as
huge
well.
for me. Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So it was coming through in every denomination, including, the Catholic Church. And so my parents went on this retreat, and one weekend, their friends invited them. And when they came back from that retreat, I just knew they were different. And we didn't go with them, but they came in the door. And I remember my mom coming down on her knees and just embracing me and hugging me and telling me, "I can't wait to tell you what's just
Oh,
happened." And as she hugged me, I know, as she hugged me, there was this love that was radiating from her that I had never felt before.
oh,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. So then what happened for your
Yeah.
family? What was the effect?
It completely changed the whole direction of our family. My mom, being a smart, savvy woman, she very much gave us a choice around, would we like to, I suppose, taste and see this experiential thing that they had of God. And so she asked me, would you like to come and see? That's all she said. Do you want to come and see what we've experienced? I just said yes, because I was thinking, whatever they have, I want.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so I ended up going to one of those kind of crazy meetings where there was old grannies there, punk rockers, in this place in the middle of Yorkshire, everyone's singing, like the air is saturated with love. That was the only way to describe it. And it was in that moment I queued up like everyone else, went up to this beautiful anointed priest in the spirit. And what was significant about that moment was when I turned around to my mom and I just said, "What do I do? What do I do here?" And she said, "Just ask Jesus into your heart. That simple, Elaine." And so I went up, and priest kind of like leant down towards me, and I said, I want to invite Jesus into my heart." And one of the interesting things that he said to me that I'll always remember, he said, "Tell me first what you need."
Oh,
I know. And I remember being shocked in that moment, going, "Why is he asking me what I need? I've never been asked that before." And so in that moment, because I was moving around so much, I just said, "I just need to catch up at school." And so he just prayed with me, and I had this touch of God. I wouldn't say it was like fireworks or anything, but it was just this love that just, went right through my whole being. That was so gentle and so kind, you know. From that moment on, I, of course, I could never forget that touch of God in that moment.
Oh, oh, I love that. I love that. All of it. So then what happened? Now you're 11. Now you've had a touch from God. Your family has shifted and changed. And what about the journey of your own heart after that?
The journey of my own heart. From that time, we then actually moved to Ireland. So at that point, I was 14, 15. And from the time I moved to Ireland, it was like God was like watching out for me, those teenage years. The first group of people that I connected with was a little Bible study. So as soon as I arrived in Ireland, I knew nobody. But my mom, being this amazing woman that she was, she connected in with a group called Campus Crusade.
Yeah. Yes.
And so they were running a Bible study and for some young people, and I went to that. And then from that Bible study, then the next connection, I kind of bumped into a group called Youth with a Mission. So around 16, 17, connected in with them. And they really like took me like up in their arms. And, I ended up training, to go on mission, went to Germany, from Germany, then went on mission out to the Philippines, worked there for a couple of years as a missionary. Really, at that point in my life, was thinking, I just want to live for God. I just want to give everything to Him. And yeah, I really felt that I was going to be called to just being single for God. I didn't think that part of His plan would be that I would get married. But I ended up coming back to Ireland, and sure, then that's when I met my lovely husband.
Okay. And he was a believer, obviously.
He was, yes, yeah. So we got married and, had a family and just started, I suppose, just the busy years of tending to our family and our children. At one point, we moved to Germany, so we lived there for a few years. And that piece in Germany was very important for us for the next, really, I suppose, deepening of my own faith personally. For those 3 years, we really didn't have any Christian support at all. And we were just there by ourselves. And in those 3 years, because of the lack of how I describe Christian activity, I really got an experience of what is Elaine like internally without any of the props.
Uh-huh.
And so it's like he stripped everything away, all the activity, all the busyness, all the distraction of the Christian life. And just at the right moment, as I was thinking, oh my goodness, I really don't think I'm a very loving person. That's what I was thinking at the end of those 3 years. And how could that be? Someone who has followed God, loved Him for so long, how could my heart, how could it show up like this after so many years? Anyway, I got my answer because for my birthday, while I just near our end of our stay there, I received a copy of John's book, The Sacred
Okay.
Romance.
How old are you now?
Um, I'm now
And how
30.
many children do you have?
At that point,
Okay.
3.
Before you go on, I want to know in those years where you didn't have fellowship or community, how did you have relationship with Jesus? Like, yeah, what was your practice to find him? Because sometimes in those early years, it can be 15 seconds in the car. Like, there's not a lot. Was that your experience?
I think for me, it was like a dwindling experience. I started off just being continuing to read scripture, worship. I loved worship. So that was always my go-to, worship songs. That was really my place, like, embracing God. We did go to a church, but the church was quite dead. So there was really no support there. And so really it was like a jug that internally, it was like a jug that was just being poured out
Mm.
slowly and just slowly emptying. So by the end of those 3 years, how well and I was connected to God, I really don't. I think I had pretty much disconnected
Mhm.
from the vine at that point.
And then you get the sacred romance.
And then the Sacred Romance came through my letterbox one day. A friend of mine in Ireland sent it to me, and I started reading it, and it pretty much turned my world upside down.
Mm.
Um, it was incredible. This was the first time that I had read something that just made complete sense to me. Up to that point, I'd understood as a Christian, yes, spiritual warfare. And I'd understood, yes, allow God to direct you. I was always someone who really listened to God. I loved knowing what He wanted and where He wanted me to go and what He wanted me to do. I had that adventurous spirit. Come on, God, just tell me what to do. And I was very formed in those areas. But it was only after I read the Sacred Romance, I went, oh my goodness, I don't know me. I don't know my own
Mm.
heart. And that is really what I got from the Sacred Romance, that if I was far from my own heart, how could I be how could I be close to God's heart if I was far from my own?
Yes.
Um, that was the deep revelation at that
Mm.
time.
Mm.
Deep revelation around that.
Wow, that's really, really important. So
Yeah,
how did
yeah.
you start to get to know your own heart?
How did I start? Really just going through all the Wild at Heart material, reading the books, just eating it up. My heart responding and starting to kind of everything was starting to make sense in my life. Um, and so what ended up happening was I ended up going on your captivating
Yes.
retreat. Um,
I didn't get to meet you
and
then, though. I didn't meet you then.
that's what,
Yeah.
no, no, oh no, I would have been one of the people who were like, Stacey wouldn't want to meet me. One of those Irish people who've got enough shame going on to kind of go, who am I?
Right.
So I'm sorry, I'm not one of the ones who queued up, but in my heart, I would have loved to. I would love to have had a conversation on that particular retreat. But God was doing so much in my life at that
Oh.
retreat. It was
Oh.
incredible. Again, that was one of the real
Like, what
highlights
was he
of
what
the
was he
next.
doing?
Well, one of the things he was doing was he was certainly showing me and revealing things to me about my own heart because of the way that you women shared.
Mm.
You shared your knowledge of God, but then you also shared this knowledge of yourself and how, you really help bridge that gap between, I suppose, in some ways, my spirituality and my humanity.
Mhm.
And that's the piece that I was missing. Um, for me, probably the point of breakthrough was when I was sitting at the back of the conference room, and I'm not too sure who was doing a
Oh,
dance.
yes.
She was up there dancing on stage. I was just overwhelmed that you guys would use things like, music and film and dance to really reveal who God is and also how he reaches out to us as his beloved. But when I was watching her dance, it just tore my heart open because I looked at her freedom and I just said, I don't have
Mm.
that. No, I don't have that
Mm.
freedom. And so there was this like pain that hit me that there was something inside me that I knew that was not free. Even though I had known God for a long time, I knew a lot about him, I had a lot of knowledge. I worked for him, very busy, missionary, was always serving him, but there was this lack of, I suppose, intimacy with God that I was missing within my own heart.
So did that propel you?
So
What did that do? I'm sure that provoked you to desire.
yeah, exactly. And so one of the beautiful things that happened after that was I was sitting at the back of the conference room, absolutely roaring my eyes
Oh.
out, not the pretty crying, as they say. It's just snot everywhere, and had my head down, and I was the only one left in the whole, conference space, and I was just there. I wasn't howling quite. I do very kind of polite crying, noise wise. And suddenly I just felt the sense of someone coming beside me. I still don't know who this woman was. I'd love to find out who it is one day. And she just put her arm around me and just sat with me
Oh.
until I stopped
Oh,
crying.
I love that.
And what was beautiful was before she came over, I was through the tears. I heard God say, read Isaiah 62. And in Isaiah 62, I just have it here. It says, um, never again will you be called the forsaken city or the desolate land. Your new name will be the city of God's delight and the bride of God. For the Lord delights in you and he will claim you as his bride. So I was reading that, and as I was reading it through the tears, Jesus said to me very clearly in my heart, he goes, and here is your ring. Yeah. So the next part of that, and this is what happens when you start stepping in to the intimate river of God's love, like was starting to happen for me in this space. These are the kind of things that happen. And so this beautiful woman who sat beside me, and she just prayed with me. And at the end of the prayer, she just took my hand and she pressed something into it. And she said, Jesus just told me to give you this. And I opened my hand, and there was this beautiful silver ring. Then I was just gone. I was just couldn't talk to me for at least 2 hours after that.
Oh, I love how he does that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
That'll do a
amazing.
shift. That's gorgeous. So then you come home after having this beautiful experience with God, and
Yes.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your walk with God after that.
So yeah, my walk with God after that just was incredible. It was so much more connected to my heart. I was just learning, just being brought deeper into worship. I had started having a bit more time by myself because I say my first three children because I went on to have two more. We have five kids. But there was a time where I was just freed up as a mom, all my kids and first three kids in school. And I just was standing one day in the kitchen thinking, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to have coffee. I'm going to have all this. I'm going to walk with my friends. I'm going to take up all these things I've never been able to do before. And then I just heard that still small voice just asking me, why don't you ask me what to do with your time?
Oh,
That moment, and you have this moment of choice whether just to brush over that still small voice. And I just was like, yes, well, what would you have me do? Because I've got all these plans. And Jesus knows my heart very well because I love a challenge. I love when he speaks to me. Here I am off wanting to do all these things. And so when I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he said one thing. Sometimes he's very, he doesn't have to use many words. And he just said, worship. That's it.
oh, oh.
And that was incredible because that's how I just, went forward for the next good few years, that I just prioritized that as something in my life. And that was incredible because it really brought a lot of intimacy and connection and communication with God. One of the interesting things, though, from that was that although I grew in that area, I was starting to notice in my journey that even though I was very attuned spiritually, that there was areas in my life that were now starting to show up that God was bringing attention to. that he was saying, hey, we need to go after some of these things that are more hidden in your heart. So that became more apparent after that particular section of my journey.
Do you feel comfortable sharing what one of those was?
When God heals you and you're set free, you don't have that shame around it anymore. So yes, I feel very free to share that. So what he was really going after, for me, was he was going after the trauma of my history
Yes.
of moving so many
Yes.
times. The reality is, to have that experience of that fragmented lifestyle, to be constantly, outside classroom doors, wondering, how am I going to fit
Mm,
in here?
mm.
It's hard. And always feeling like an outsider, no one knowing really where I was from, my accent, and a deep sense of just always feeling like I'm out of the tribe.
Yes.
And as we know, psychologically, feeling like you're out of the tribe can feel like death.
Right.
And so he went in for that trauma of the girl who really had a wound of not belonging. And so what he was going after was he was going after, well, what were the things that I used to, I suppose, in some ways protect myself, and what did I use to kind of help myself connect? And it was really around my relating styles. I figured out quite quickly when I was young that just pleasing people, being chameleon like, was all, what is it that I can do to make myself feel accepted here, feel known, feel seen? Always the one reaching out, pleasing, you know. And also, what came along with that was another part of just trying to protect myself as well, which was very much the overthinking, thinking, always analyzing, always trying to work things out. And so the healing piece for me was when God, came in behind these two, um, I suppose, coping mechanisms of mine, which were starting to really impact my relationships around me, and also the work that I was doing for God. And just Him coming in, removing those coping mechanisms, which was, as we know, is a pretty scary
Yes,
thing,
yes.
for all of us when He decides He's going to remove them, and going in after that young hurting part of me and just bringing his mothering, comforting love into that wound. Um, Very, very hard, challenging, tricky time, but I'm so glad that he is so passionate about us that even when he brings us through these dark valleys to heal our trauma, that um, he knows that we're going to be we're going to be okay, and we're going to come out of these dark valleys free,
Mm,
walking in freedom, and also walking in just a deeper sense of the profound
mm,
love that he
mm.
has for us. So
That's so beautiful, Elaine, and I know that people are relating to that. I'm glad that you mentioned that there's different areas we're strong. We know He loves us. We're engulfed in His love, but we have a story still that needs tending to. And just for the listeners, was that a period of a month?
I wish.
What was this season like? How long?
Well, it took about, in total, it took seven
There you
years.
go. There you go.
Yeah,
And it needed to. It needed to take that long.
yeah,
We are depth and complex human beings,
yeah,
and
that's
God
right.
is attentive in pursuing every aspect and a God of process. So if it had been a month, you would not be the woman that you are today with the depth and the ability to see and invite others. Thank you. How is God pursuing you these days? How is He romancing you?
How's he romancing? Oh my goodness. I think it's really connected to that 7 year story. It's the result of that story. It's how he's romancing me. Stacey, you gave a talk on the Mothering Heart of God Homecoming
Yes.
2019, I think. And it was only at that point I really understood that, that the healing that needed to take place in my heart was really healing part of my soul, as I describe it, that was able to receive the comfort, just the comfort of God.
Yes.
And I probably, it's, I'd probably given a lot of comfort to people out there. We often do that in the very things we need ourselves, we often give other people.
Mhm.
And so that is how he's romancing me these days through, you know, different opportunities. He's opened up my heart just to receive his comfort. So in any area of my life where I'm being challenged, whether I'm feeling fear or I'm feeling, anxiety about something, or whatever it is, whatever the circumstances are bringing up in my life, um, it's just keeps romancing me, calling me back into, again, that mothering, comforting, consoling embrace. And it's hard to describe, but it is the most beautiful place that I have found my heart for many, many years. It is a complete place of receiving from him,
Yes.
and I absolutely love it.
It's so good. So how has that
Yeah.
changed your desire for others? Or what is it that's in your heart that you would like others to come to know? Even the men and women that are listening right now.
I think what I've finally understood for myself, um, and I will go back to that talk you gave, Stacey, because that was huge. That understanding that, God really the spiritual journey is about a reattachment to to God. So that is the goal. So everything that God had done in my life up to this point, or up to this point in my life, it's all been in preparation for that moment of really attaching to God in his fathering heart and his mothering heart, to be able to receive deep in our core, deep at my core, that protective love, that love where that he wants to provide, he wants to protect, that he wants to meet my need for security, you know. And not only that, but he also, behind that lovely shield of protection that he gives us through the Father's heart, but he also wants, behind that shield, wants to nurture us and comfort us. And so I never thought the spiritual journey would look like this at this point in my life, that it would be the joy and the strength that I have actually really has been deeply impacted, really just through this reattachment with him at a very deep, nurturing, protective level, having my needs met, being consoled by him, no matter what the circumstances, which has been huge. But no matter what circumstances that I have going on in my life, that there is a place that I can go, that I can meet him in my heart, where I can receive on a daily basis any comfort that I need from him. And also that sense of he is for me, good things are going to happen, and that I am his delight. But I would have known that many years ago. I would have had all the information about that. But the amazing thing about where I am at in this journey is, like, now it's actually happening. I describe it to people now as the gift of supernatural receptivity.
Ah,
This is what he has healed and opened my heart up for. And this was the goal that he had since the time I was born.
that feels like something that, well, two things. One, as you're talking, I'm so stirred, and I feel like the
Mhm.
foundation underneath my feet is getting more solid. That is just such
Mhm.
truth. And I love what you
Yeah.
said, spiritual receptivity. Seems like
Mm.
that for those that are listening that don't know this in the core of their being as much as they long to, that's something that we could pray for,
Yes.
because he's
Yeah.
speaking, he wants us to know it.
Absolutely. What I understand now is, to really be able to love others well, as in this quality love, he needs to love us first. And I really do think this is where the enemy lies, is like a lot of the warfare that we experience is around blocking us understanding how do we receive his love. Just the opening of our hearts. It's a very vulnerable thing, and a lot of times those areas where we are not able to receive from him, these are the areas where, say the biggest blockers of receiving his love are self-protection and self-reliance.
Which would be fear, right?
Fear. Oh, yeah. Fear of scarcity, fear of not having enough, or fear for me of not being invited, of not being included.
Mhm.
And that's actually one of the things as well, which has been very much the fruit of over the last, couple of years now, is just releasing all that to him, trusting him with that. And the joy, this deep joy that I keep experiencing, it's coming in kind of different circumstances in my life, where the girl who was always on the outside and always longed to be invited in is now being invited in. There are invitations coming from Jesus to me just in my normal everyday life now, which he is leading the way with, rather than me struggling in my human efforts. So I'm now being on the receiving end of the joy of his invitations in my life. Um, Does that
It
make
does.
sense, what I'm
Oh,
saying?
absolutely. You're not chasing it for meaning.
Not chasing it
Him
now.
wanting your heart, him after your healing, and from that place of knowing his love, that it's not performance oriented, and it's all this invitation. And now you're a therapist. Now you're teaching. You're
Mhm.
leading other people deeper into their hearts at retreats and privately, all kinds of beautiful things flourishing, but from a different place than they would have been, say, 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah. So much striving 10 years ago. So much striving. And this is very different because this is really, it's, and again, we read these things, we should be kind of, stepping out into this world as Christians from a place of rest, that restful place in our hearts, or Psalm 21. We read it and we go, oh, yes, that's beautiful. I love that. I want that. But at this part of my journey, 55, I can say, yes, I am now experiencing this. I'm starting to experience just pouring out to the world, connection and love, loving others, to my family first and foremost, but then, to people he's called me to reach out to, but very much from this place of
Ah,
rest, no striving.
so
It's
good. It is
beautiful.
beautiful. Elaine, to close,
Yeah.
would you just pray that over the people listening? Would you feel comfortable to do that? I would
Yes.
love that. Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, I just thank you, Lord. I just thank you for this journey, this beautiful journey that you bring us on. I just pray now for just anyone who's listening. Um, just as I'm praying now, I'm seeing a picture of a river, and I just pray now that anyone who is standing on the bank of this river, that they would just hear your beautiful voice, Jesus, calling them to step into the river, to step away from striving, to step away from the bank of self-protection, self-reliance, to step away from, the muscular Christianity, as we call it, and really just step into the river of your love, to step away from the self and just to really step into the river of your love, to be able to receive the love that you have for them. Father, I just pray for just healing for hearts that are listening now, just to be able to supernaturally start being able to receive all the nurturing and the love, and to know that you want to meet their needs if they could only just let go and to receive from you. I just pray this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. We are
Amen.
all in agreement. Thank you, Elaine. Oh my goodness. So good, so rich, and so much. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Completely my pleasure. Delight to be here.
Oh, good. And for me and for all you listening, just yes, in agreement over that prayer for you, excited for the more that's coming, and may you be deeply blessed. Until next time, see you.